Good evening. I would like to thank everybody that's here, and I would like to thank those of you that are viewing at home on YouTube. We very much appreciate you being here for this storytelling time. My name is Larry Temple, and I will be telling the first story. In 1952, my father graduated from college at the age of 35. He had gone to school on the GI Bill. He had 3 children at home, myself and my 2 older sisters. He took a job at Lake Zurich, Illinois, which is about 40 miles northwest of Chicago, not far from the Wisconsin border. His family was all from Wisconsin. Now, the first thing they did when my father took the job at Ela Vernon High School was they made him the freshman class sponsor. Fast forward 3 years, and what was the freshman class is now going to be the senior class. It's August, and traditionally they went on a senior class trip by train from Chicago to the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. They saw the nation's capital and then came back by train. So they were scheduled to leave early Monday morning. And that Saturday, just prior to it, saw our family loaded up and headed north so my parents could get rid of us kids for a week with who else? Relatives. We started out from Lake Zurich, Illinois. We drove about an hour north to Milwaukee. My Aunt Mavis, my father's youngest sister, lived there. Aunt Mavis was the black sheep of the family. She had been raised strict Methodist, but had made the mistake of falling in love with Peter Musio, who was an Italian Catholic. Now, the 3 big sins in the Methodist Church at that time were smoking, drinking, and marrying a Catholic. Now, everybody knew that not only had she married a Catholic, but the Catholics celebrated communion with real wine, so she was drinking alcohol. And not only that, but Uncle Pete smoked. So Aunt Mavis had committed the trifecta of Methodist sins. We arrived at Aunt Mavis's. She had 3 daughters. There was Paula and Susan. They were close to the age of my next oldest sister, Jan. Paula was 3 minutes older than Susan. Never let her forget that. Now, Paula was known as the wild one. And when we got there, my parents immediately wanted to go see New Baby Maryland. Us kids weren't interested in New Baby Maryland. We went outside and we played. And I don't think it was 10 minutes after we got outside, Paula, the wild one, unbuttoned the front of her dress and opened it up and showed me something I had never seen before. Her belly button was an Audi. I had never seen an Audi before. My sisters were all innies. My parents were innies. All my friends were innies. Paula opened up her dress. She also was an Audi. I couldn't wait to get inside. We got inside. I lifted the cover of New Baby Maryland, and sure enough, she was an Audi also. What did this all mean? Well, it wasn't long. My parents wanted to get on the road. We left my sister Jan there, drove an hour north to Neenah, Wisconsin, where my dad's oldest sister, Gladys, lived with Uncle Ken and their 5 children. Now, the 4th oldest children was Karen, and she was close to the age of my sister Judy. Judy would spend the week with them. As soon as we got there, Karen and Judy wanted to play their favorite game, which was school. They were the teachers, and my poor cousin Kenny and I were the students. They taught us spelling. My sister loved spelling. Actually, it was quite educational because I learned to sound out words by their letters. I learned to spell that way. Then they went on to some higher spelling, how to turn singulars into plurals and all this stuff. And luckily, my parents wanted to get on the road. So we loaded up in the car and headed north, about 40 miles north of Green Bay, Wisconsin, to a small town called Oconto Falls. Immediately after we got in the car, my mother started giving me the talk. She said, don't pick your nose. Grandma hates it when you pick your nose. She said, don't scratch yourself. I said, Grandpa scratches himself. Mom said, it's his house. He can do what he wants to. You can't. And I said, why not? She said, because I said so. She said, don't be picky with your food. And whatever you do, don't tell them that I'm going to have a baby. And I said, why not? She said, because I'm not. She said, now Aunt Maud is going to be there. And I knew Aunt Maud. Aunt Maud was my grandma's oldest sister. She was the oldest of 8 children. She'd never married. She was a very austere woman, stood very erect and looked down her nose at you over these glasses. She wore dark black dresses, and her shoes had just a long row of buttons on them. She said, don't talk back to Aunt Maud. She said, Aunt Maud knows everything there is about raising children. I said, she does? And my mom said, yes, that's because she never had any. All the way to Oconto Falls, my mother drilled me on what I wasn't supposed to do and what I could do. We got there about supper time. We sat down, we ate supper with Grandma and Grandpa. My dad visited about the people in town. He'd grown up there. And after supper, my parents said, we're going to turn in early. We're going to get up early in the morning. We're going to drive back and have a good part of the day to pack and get ready for those 42 hormone-enhanced high school seniors. They turned in. As they started for the bedroom, my grandma says, I bet it'll feel lonely in that car without the children. And my mom said, it will be heaven. They went to bed, we watched a little bit of TV, and then we went to bed. And it was the first time at my grandparents' that I had had a room all to myself. And it was kind of lonely. I woke up the next morning. My parents had already left. It was Sunday. Ate breakfast, got ready. We went to church. They worshiped at the First Methodist Church of Oconto Falls. My Aunt Maud, my great Aunt Maud was there, and she had a solo that day. Well, she had a solo every day. In fact, she had a solo every time they sang a hymn. She had this strong contralto voice that would sing about the old rugged cross, and when the roll is called up yonder, and bringing in the sheaves. When church was over, Aunt Maud walked back home with us. She was going to have Sunday dinner at our house. Grandma got dinner on the table. We sat down, we prayed, we started eating. We had no sooner started eating than Aunt Maud turned to me and she said, young Lawrence. See, my father was Lawrence, so I was also Lawrence. I was young Lawrence. Young Lawrence, how are your parents? I said, they're fine. I'm not supposed to tell you that my mom's going to have a baby. Aunt Maud and Grandma immediately perked up. And Aunt Maud said, why not? And I said, because she isn't. Well, Aunt Maud then said, young Lawrence, how are you doing in school? I can tell you how to do much better. And I said, oh, that would be great. My mom says you know everything about raising kids. She said, she does? And I said, yes, she says that's because you never had any. Aunt Maud started to turn pink. My grandma was trying to hide a smile behind the napkin, and my grandfather was choking on some peas and carrots. Well, Aunt Maud was kind of quiet for the rest of the meal, never said much. We ate dessert. She got up to help Grandma do the dishes. Grandma always did the dishes immediately after the meal. And when she got done, I could hear them back in the kitchen. I heard words like obstreperous and unruly, and he needs discipline. My grandfather and I went out into the living room, and he started telling me stories. Oh, I loved his stories of him growing up near the Oconto River with his brothers hunting and fishing, about the things they would do on the farm. Aunt Maud left as soon as the dishes were done. Grandma came out, and I realized there was kind of a censorship that they had arranged. If Grandma didn't mind the story, she said nothing, and Grandpa would tell it. If Grandma said, "Papa," it meant she didn't approve of the story, but he could tell it anyway. But if she said, "Herbert," that was it. He had to quit right there. He started to tell me a story about this man that had a glass eye, and he put it in his mouth and accidentally swallowed it, and Grandma said, "Herbert." It was 14 years before I ever learned how that story concluded. Well, we watched a little TV, and then Sunday night we went to bed. And I woke up Monday morning ready to spend the day with my grandfather. But he was gone. I said, "Grandma, where's Grandpa?" She said, "Oh, it's green bean season in Oconto Falls. And when it's green bean season, they start up the old steam canner." Now, your grandfather used to run the steam engine at the old paper mill before it shut down and turned to electricity. And he's the only one in the area that knows how to run the steam canner. So they always use him when the garden produce starts to come in and need to be canned. I said, "When's he going to get home?" She said, "Oh, he'll be home about supper time." That seems so long for me. But Grandma